So yeah, I just got in this camera. This is the Panasonic GX850. It's a compact mirrorless camera. It costs $550. It comes with the body and the kit lens, which is a 12 to 32 millimeter one. And I've been using it for the last few weeks now, taking photos, videos. I used it on a shot recently on location for a VR video. And it got me really thinking about why would anyone spend $550 for a dedicated digital camera when you have all these smartphones nowadays that could take stellar photos and videos. So far this year, we've had some stellar Android smartphones released. You have things like the LG G6, the Huawei P10, the Samsung Galaxy S8, and all three are known for their cameras and their performances. So in this video, I'm going to compare those three devices against the Panasonic GX850, and you guys can make the determination as to whether or not $550 is worth putting into a dedicated camera by itself, or maybe just go with one of the smartphones that I mentioned. The other main reason why I chose the GX850 is because of its price point, $550. It's pretty inexpensive when you consider mirrorless cameras, and on top of that, it is super tiny and compact. When it comes to the testing, I'm not going to do a whole lot of controlled tests. Instead, I'm just going to set them all to the automatic modes and snap photos and videos. Now, for the Panasonic GX850, I'm going to use the kit lens that comes with it. So that's the 12 to 32 millimeter one. It has an f3.5 to 5.6 aperture. The first shots I'm going to show you here are some outdoor scenes with excellent lighting. Now, this first one here with a path leading to some trees in the background, I gotta say the GX850 and the S8 managed to do the best because they handled exposure, details, dynamic range, and color accuracy very well. The G6 has some great looking details, but the clouds look a little bit overblown. And as far as the P10 is concerned, it just seems to appear a little bit lower in contrast, so it looks flatter. The results are the same with this next shot. The GX850 and the S8 managed to do the best for the scene. The G6 isn't too far behind, but you just have that weird exposure again with the clouds. And with the P10, it still has a lower contrast look with some softer details. For these next few shots, I'm going to be strictly focusing on details performance. So with this first one here of Mega Man, they all look fantastic, but when we look closer, we do notice that the G6 tends to look over sharpened, and the P10 just seems softer. And overall, I gotta give it to the GX850 for this one because you could see more details in the shot. For example, the fine dust specks that have collected on his helmet. The results are no different with the shot of the bricks here. The S8 just seems a little bit overexposed overall, but when it comes to details, the G6 again looks extremely over sharpened. It's not terrible, but still more sharpened than the GX850 and the S8. And the P10 appears softer yet again. And finally, for these last two images of BB-8 and the statue, the results are no different again. We get the strongest details capture out of the G6, GX850, and the S8, but the P10 continues to look slightly softer in tone than the rest. When it comes to taking selfies, there's a clear winner here, and that's the GX850 because it features a tiltable 180-degree screen, and it's also leveraging the same Micro Four Thirds sensor to snap the photos. So details are extremely rich with this one. It puts to shame the other cameras. The P10 and S8 do nice in taking selfies, but the details capture can't compare to the GX850. You could see it specifically in the eyebrows. They're clearly defined, whereas with the G6, they appear smudged. For these next few shots, I'm going to talk about their low light performances, and I gotta stress again that I'm going to be using the automatic modes for each one. So this first one of the books on the shelf, both the GX850 and the S8 really stand out for their strong characteristics. The G6 has a noticeable level of noise throughout the shot, and the P10's color reproduction appears just washed out in tone. Moving on to the shot of the Easter eggs, it's kind of weird because the GX850 has a warmer color tone than the rest. But if we look deeper into the shots, the G6 and the GX850 really stand out for their details, especially in the carrot. You can see those individual strands of string. They're clearly more defined, more so than the S8 and the P10. The last shot here is kind of interesting, with the lawn and the pathways crossing through it. There's a strong light source in the scene, so everything looks yellowish in tone. But the S8 does something weird. It seems to be increasing the exposure because you can kind of see the outline of the tree way in the background. That's pitch black for all the rest. But this comes at the expense of more noise in the shot. Now, it doesn't really impact its details capture, which is second only to the GX850. These next few shots should be interesting because I'm going to be using their manual modes under low light. Unfortunately, you can't adjust the aperture on the smartphones, but I tried to make it as uniform as possible, so I set all four to ISO 100 and a shutter speed of 10 seconds. Obviously, the results are going to be different because the GX850 has an aperture f3.5 at its widest, while the G6, P10, and S8 all have apertures of f1.8, f2.2, and f1.7. For this first shot of Mega Man, the S8 is able to accumulate the most light, which in the process produces a higher exposure. Now the GX850 has the best balance out of the bunch due to its exposure, details, and the white balance. Meanwhile, the G6 is the softest and has a greenish tone, and the P10 does just a little bit better. Going back to the shot of the Easter egg, this time I shot them in almost complete darkness. There's only a little bit light reflecting from an adjacent hallway, so it's really interesting what the result is. So using automatic mode, all three phones managed to expose more of the details, while the GX850 just looked dark. However, there's a dramatic shift when you use their long exposures, and the GX850 takes the crown because of its exceptional details capture. You can actually visualize the sparkles on those Easter eggs, but they're nearly indistinguishable on the smartphones. The next area I want to go into is 4K video recording. Now, I set all four devices to automatic mode, 4K capture at a resolution of 3840 by 2160 pixels, and they're all shooting at the same 30 frames per second. This first scene of the statue in the garden is particularly interesting because all four devices deliver sharp looking footage, and that's what you kind of expect when the lighting conditions are ideal. The only one to stand out from the rest is the P10, which tends to favor higher exposure, but besides that, it's really tough to notice any significant differences between them. For the next shot of these cars in this parking lot, details performance out of all four are great, can't complain about them, but the S8 and the P10 seems to handle dynamic range a lot better than the rest. The GX850's footage seems a little bit overexposed, and the G6 continues to have that overblown look with the clouds. So under low light, shooting the Easter eggs again, we do notice a great deal of noise in the footage from the three smartphones, so it appears very grainy. It becomes more noticeable when you crop into the videos. But we still like it more than GX850 because its footage is by far the darkest. You could barely notice any of the details in the shots. And out of the bunch, it looks like the S8 seems to be the brightest. After taking all these photos and videos, it makes you wonder, why would someone choose to pay $550 to buy a compact mirrorless camera? And that's a very interesting question because if we're to look back at the test that we did here, we did notice that the GX850 performed very favorably in a bunch of them. And in most situations, it was the best out of the bunch. But we wouldn't say that the gap was significantly more than these smartphones. And it goes to show that today's smartphones are more than capable of snapping some really good footage if the conditions are ideal. So as we've seen in the testing, there's not a huge difference in terms of the quality between the GX850 and the smartphones if you're just going to be using automatic mode. Of course, that changes a little bit under manual, but if you're willing to invest more money into the Micro Four Thirds system, get different lenses, that's where you're going to see a substantial change in performance and quality. So what I'm trying to say here is $550 might sound risky when you look at how these smartphones rivals the GX850's quality when you use the automatic settings. But if you're able to invest into the system and maybe pick up a couple lenses, you'll be convinced and really begin to see the difference in performance out of these smartphones and this mirrorless camera. So what do you guys think? I've been using the GX850 for several weeks now, and I really love it for its compact size and its overall performance. It's a great backup camera as well. But then again, these smartphones nowadays can also be more than capable, just as long as the lighting conditions are ideal. So if you guys want to learn more about any of the stuff I talked about in this video, you can check out our website, androidauthority.com. This is John V, signing off.